with our growing self-confidence as a nation, that we felt that we were ready to take our place in the map of the world, right? So this was our second initiative, which came in the 1990s. Like many initiatives, this was not proactive, it was reactive. The first one was largely proactive. There was an aspiration, but there was no impulsion. The second, the liberalization, globalization, privatization initiative, came largely because of the impetus given by a balance of payments crisis. Very simply put, our imports were far less than our exports. We were forced to go to the IMF for our loan because there was an imbalance of payments. And IMF insisted on structural adjustment. All of you will be familiar now with the EU, that this has become common. You were studying Greek. Somebody said you were student of Greek. Anyway, the imbalance of payments is now common. It was less common in those days. It was unknown to us. But we suddenly were met with a crisis. We had to do structural adjustment, which also meant opening our markets and becoming part of the global export and import trade agreements. By and large, till then, our agreements had been bilateral. We had been relying on self-reliance, producing for ourselves, a kind of subsistence. We are not entirely out of, the global trading map. But now we became part of WTO, and LPG, as it is called, liberalization. We liberalized both our trade and our internal mechanisms. Globalization, we looked outward, and privatization, which was one more. Part of the overall new public management, as you call it. This was going on all over the world at that time. If you remember, Reagan in USA and Margaret Thatcher in UK were the vanguards of that new neoliberal agenda, and those winds came here as well. What you see around you, electronic city, is a product of this liberalization, privatization and globalization, because almost at once, as we reached outward, we were able to tap into the need for trained, skilled IT engineers. And that was a gap. There were people who could work long, hard hours, coding, writing source codes, and that was the gap which companies like Infosys, which Dr. Madhavi spoke of, Wipro is another, they filled that gap. So in a way, our reaching outward came at an opportune time. And this also meant that we had to align ourselves with the way trade and private enterprise works overseas. So we had to kind of jump some of our more moribund regulations. Until then, the industry had to always come to the government for some permission or approvals or other. And we, by and large, did away with that system which used to be called the license permit Raj. You had to have a license or a permit for everything. So by and large, we kind of jumped that kind of thing. We tried to liberalize our bureaucracy. To an extent, we succeeded, not completely. This is still a work in progress, so many decades after it started. But that was our second big change. So if you are looking at the landscape in which Indian public policy making is taking place, this is the broad landscape in which Indian public policy making is taking place. The first change, which largely affected the smaller areas and the rural areas. The second was largely something which affected industry, by and large, both manufacturing and the services sector. So today in management you speak, the favorite jargon is disruption. right? It's a very favorite word in all management's B schools. These were the two major disruptions which India experimented with long before the word became fashionable. Right? What about today? Now, today we are standing at the cusp of something which is both old and new, and you see it all the time. You're sitting in this nice swanky room and you're wearing petas, which are very, very traditional headgear, and believe me there are people who still wear this as part of their normal day-to-day life. May not be with all the nice zari, but a more simple one, but people still wear them. They are a very useful thing to have in Bangalore winters. So this is called a peta. So we are at that cusp where, I don't know whether you are cracked, but the old and the new seem to be coexisting in India at the same time, right? And you have growing, globally exposed class, those who are, this started with the 1980s when the LPG experiment started and we started looking overseas, that we benchmark ourselves against the best in the West. So that could be North America, or that could be Europe, and we want the same thing for our people. So now you have someone, there used to be the old days, some of the faculty here will remember that to pay an electricity bill, we used to go and stand in the queue in the electrical substation and we used to pay our monthly electricity bill. Today we do it at the click of a button. Right? Someone who is, let us say, sitting in Germany or USA, but who has a plot of land in India, he wants to sell off his land and he wants to do it sitting there. He does not want to come here to register or sell his land. Right? And we are doing e-governance initiatives to enable that kind of changes to happen. So we are kind of adapting the new to the kind of ethos which we are used to, and we are making some kind of what we call in India khichdi, which is a mixture of rice and dal. So it's a very peculiar Indian concoction where we are able to use the new to serve the needs in a landscape which is both very ancient but which is also very modern at the same time. So that is what we do together at the same time. Let's go to the next.